Hey, welcome to the Table Talks podcast. My name is Tim, and today I'm joined by Pastor Steven. And during this season, we are unpacking our series At the Movies. During At the Movies, we unpack some of our favorite films and how their story coincides and intersects with God's story. So we've been going over some incredible movies, and today we get to unpack the movie The Boys in the Boat. So we're going to be talking about that incredible story of these young men that are part of the crew rowing team and how they go and join the Olympics and beat all the odds. And so thrilled to join you in discussing your message and unpacking it further. It was amazing. I think this year was my favorite at the movies overall as far as the message went for what we've done. So I'm kind of curious first to just begin, like, what was the process like in writing that message and what compelled you about the story of this film specifically?
Yeah, I think when we sat down as a team to talk about all the potential movie options, I hadn't seen this movie yet, but it had been in my feed, like as far as one of the movies I want to see. And I thought, okay. And then I heard a little bit of what the premise was. And in that moment, I thought, oh, it's an underdog story, and one of the greatest underdog stories out there is Gideon. And like in my brain, I just started formulating how this connection, because I kind of understood the premise of the movie, how that could correlate, how people could connect with it. And so as I got the assignment to go, okay, go watch it, go start doing it, this year, I did a little bit of the reverse. A lot of the times I have watched the movies and then said, okay, where does the story fit in? But this time around, I said, I want to really understand overall the story of Gideon because I feel like it was the most connected to the story or the movie, The Boys in the Boat. And I studied that. I really drilled into the ins and outs. Where do I think there might be some potential crossovers? And then as I got into the movie, I'm like, I had this moment of crisis of like, is this still the right story from the Bible to like connect it? And then as I started to write and formulate the content together, I could see the beauty of it coming to fruition, and I was really excited about the process. This one felt almost like it flowed out of me faster, maybe because I had the ideas already coming. The process still took just as long as a normal message writing scenario, and you think that you've screwed it up 100 times before you actually get there, but I feel good about what came together.
Yeah. I mean, probably took even longer, and technically it's like a shorter message because you're using movie clips, right?
Yeah.
For those who haven't seen the movie yet, can you give us like an overview of the story, and then maybe also an overview, because you said you tied it in with the story of Gideon in scriptures. Can you give us kind of an overview of both, maybe separate, and then we'll talk kind of how it coincides after?
Yeah. So the movie The Boys in the Boat is a story about the University of Washington's rowing team. After the Great Depression, in the midst of still really difficult economic times, the coach of the University of Washington's rowing team needed extra men for his junior varsity boat. And so he put out a call to anybody that was willing to come try out for the team. An 8-man team could come. And so all of these people who are struggling economically, you get to know a little bit, but they show up because not only do they get on the team and have this opportunity, but they get housing, they get food, and a part-time job, which was really hard to come by.
Great deal.
Yeah. So they were very excited. But then one thing that I thought was really unique about this story is the fact that it doesn't actually chronicle one specific person only. You get the main character that you could say, Joe Rance, is highlighted, his story throughout the movie, but it never singles out him as the only person. It is constantly showcasing how the crew, the rowing team, is one. Mm-hmm. And this beautiful reality that without community, without unity, it doesn't come to fruition. And like even the moments when Joe had a moment of crisis and didn't want to be a part of the team, you could see his isolation kind of pull away. And it was this beautiful connection of the value of teamwork and unity against all odds. And so they end up going up against teams that are filled with prestigious and unbelievable athletes who have been rowing since they were little children. And these guys are working class individuals who, against all odds, come against these massive teams, find their way in the Olympics, and win the gold medal. It is unbelievable.
Yeah.
So cool to see. Like I cry. I'm not a super crier. And I like got welled up with emotion. I cried multiple times. I'm like, oh my gosh. I like, you did it. You did it. I'm like, I know how the story ends, but
Yeah.
it's beautiful. And so that's the Boys in the Boat movie.
And it's based on a true story too.
Yeah,
Right?
based on a true story. And then on the other side, Gideon. So Gideon is one of the members of the Israelite clan. And so there is 12 tribes of Israel, the nation of Israel. At this point in time, it's in the Old Testament. It's in the period of the book of the Bible written in Judges chapter 6, where Israel has turned their back on God. And the surrounding nations, especially the Midianites, are basically terrorizing them and taking all of their stuff, pushing them down, attacking them, stealing their women. And Gideon gets approached by God after his people cry out to the God of their ancestors saying, we know we're out of bounds with what you've wanted for us. Would you please come help us? This is miserable. And so God approaches Gideon, as he is hiding from the Midianites. There was a lot of weird back and forth languages there. As he's hiding from them, trying to get a meal and threshing wheat. And God's response to Gideon was, hey, mighty warrior. This little guy who's hiding, trying to get a meal, God comes in the midst of all of this and calls him a mighty warrior. And he's like, no way. Like, I'm the least of the least. But he's like, no, through you, I'm going to restore the nation of Israel.
Yeah.
You are going to go and help fight against these Midianites, and you are going to become this great nation again. And so Gideon ends up getting a bunch of people together. He tests God a bunch of times to say, is it really you? And eventually believes. But he gets all these men to come together. And there's so many. I think there's 22,000 men that come together. And God's like, that's too many because you guys will go win the battle and then you'll think it's all about you.
Yeah.
So he uses this tactic of sending them down to a stream and says, okay, the men that lap with their hands to their face, those are the ones you're going to choose. Everybody else who just shoves their face in the water to drink, we're going to get rid of them. So only 300 men used their hands. So he goes,
that's wild already.
Yeah. 22,000.
Just dunk their heads in it?
Yes. 22,000 down to 300. And he goes, with those 300, Gideon, you are going to defeat this enemy that has been torturing them for 7 years. And so it's just wild story. Of course, we know, because we have history, God comes through. He uses an interpretation of a dream to give Gideon this exciting information that God is still with him. And then he actually uses the tactic of surrounding the enemy with these loud trumpets and these clay jars. And they get so confused, they end up killing each other, not the Israelites, the Midianites, and they are made victorious. And God restores the nation of Israel without their faults,
Yeah.
And they go and they run forward, and the rest is written in the Bible. It's beautiful.
Nice. It's a true for both of them, from the movie and the story of Gideon. They're like true underdog stories.
Oh yeah,
right. Which we all love. I'm curious if you've ever thought about like what all this tells us about God's character. That's kind of what I wanted to double click on in a couple ways here. But the first thing I was thinking of is it is a beautiful story of redemption for all of them. And there's a lot of people who are like hoping, praying for that kind of story in them. Like life is full of things, right? Good and bad, beauties and bombs is how I've heard it phrased recently. And maybe somebody is in that space right now, and they're praying for that like redeeming moment, like God to call them up to something or do something great through them.
Yeah.
But even like in the story of Gideon, like why would God even allow them to get to that point where there's a need for that in that space? Like, what do you think that teaches us about God?
Yeah. I've often struggled and wrestled with that myself, of like, God is known as a father. And so it's like, why do you let us walk away and go through pain or choose scenarios in life? But I'm a dad.
Yeah.
So I watch my kids, and I also get to the point where I want them to learn. I want them to grow. If I always protect them from everything and I step in before harm comes their way, they don't necessarily always pick it up. And so I do the best that I can to guide and train and help them. But there are so many moments where I will sit back and I will go, okay, I've given you the insights that you need to know. And I'm watching and I'm aware of what's happening, but I'm gonna let you, fall off of that thing, or
Right.
I'm gonna let you burn your hand quickly because it will teach you a lesson. But I'm right there, available. The second you say, "Daddy, Daddy, I need you," I'm there.
Yeah.
And it's very clear throughout the Bible. We can see this struggle, this relationship with people wanting to be close to God, but then getting distracted by things that are maybe alluring them in different areas of life. And God going, okay, like you can go check that thing out. But the second you turn back, I will be there. And I love this because it's also one of those moments where you see God come through in a way that doesn't make logical sense.
Yeah.
He uses the weakest guy in the weakest clan from the weakest tribe to restore the nation against this enemy that has torn them down over and over and over again. You use these working class guys in a depression-riddled society to go win the gold medal of the Olympics representing your country against the elite powerhouses of the world. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And so I think God sometimes does that too, because it showcases how much opportunity there is when you are with him.
Yeah.
See great things. And it's not always perfect. It's not like it's easy to write the beautiful story, and it doesn't always end that way.
Yeah.
But that's where our hope comes from, looking forward to Jesus, knowing that our hope is also beyond this world.
Yeah. You talked about how the one thing that really stood out in your message to me was you talked about how God calls Gideon a mighty hero before he's actually done anything.
Yeah.
Which is a wild thing.
Yeah.
The guy's literally hiding in a cave, and he like one of the first words out of God's mouth to him is mighty hero, which obviously Gideon, his first reaction is like, you got the wrong guy.
Yeah.
In that moment. You had your 3 lessons that you mentioned in your message. I want to highlight the first and the third because I want to tie in my questions to this. The first lesson was God sees who you can be, not just who you are today.
Yeah.
So God saw in Gideon his future and what he had. And you also made that connection, right, with the coach for the boys in the boat.
Yeah.
He saw in them something they might not even seen in themselves.
Yeah.
And he chose the JV team to represent them in the Olympics
Yeah.
over the varsity team, right? And then the third lesson was God's vision reaches beyond my reason, right? Which those connect to one another as well. And it seems like a very simple thing to understand conceptually. Like, God sees more in me than I see in myself. God sees things beyond my understanding. God obviously sits outside of time and can see things in my future that maybe I don't see in myself. Yeah. Conceptually, I think that's not hard to understand. I think what's really hard is actually allowing that to change us.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how do we let that understanding actually impact the way we live our lives?
Yeah. It's a great question. I had to think about it. I gotta think about that for a second, because it is one of those scenarios that it's so easy to hear it.
Yeah.
And to go, oh yeah.
I think that's also like I think that's most things when it comes to spiritual life. Like, it's on Sundays, we sit and we hear great messages like, wow, amazing. Like, I learned something new today. But how do we let it like drop 8 inches right from the head to the heart type thing? Yeah.
Yeah. A phrase that I say all the time is God is the God of action.
Yeah.
I believe wholeheartedly that once you have information and you put action to it, it's where you will often see the fruit and the reality.
Yeah.
For instance, I have a bunch of garden beds in my backyard.
Yeah.
And I have literally probably 50 or 60 bags of seeds in my house. Different fruits, different vegetables, all these wonderful things. And I know in my heart of hearts that if I take those seeds that just look bare, like a little seed right now, and I put them in the dirt and I cover them and I make sure that there's no weeds pulling away from them and I water them, over the course of time, I can see that that seed is going to become this plant that actually produces multiple things and more seeds to create wonderful things.
Yeah.
My garden bed is currently full of weeds right now because although I have that knowledge, I have yet to take that knowledge, put it into practice, and reap the benefits of it. And sometimes I think that people might hear something about who God can see or who God sees in them because of somebody else that sees it in them and calls it out in them, or they're reading a passage of scripture, or they walk through a moment of life and somebody says something, but then they don't take the step to do something about it. In Gideon's story, he heard that. And then his first response was, okay, if it's really you, God, if it's real, like if it's really, let me make you a meal. Let me prepare an offering for you. He heard information, even though he didn't fully believe it. He even responded, you got the wrong guy. He ran home, created a thing, put it in front of the Lord, and then when he did, the Lord received his action. And Gideon then got the realization, this really is God.
Yeah.
Okay, so it went from, I don't think so, to let me do something about it. Whoa. I just was in the presence of the angel of the Lord.
Yeah.
How am I alive? Like
Yeah.
he had heard the stories about God, but now he had interacted and seen how patient, how gentle, how kind God was to him. The fact that he approached him just as much as he wanted help. Like it's this beautiful reality that sometimes we can just spend so much of our time thinking, or we can go, okay, God's vision is beyond my reason. Like, yes, God has a plan, da 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 da. He also gave you a brain. He also gave you an ability. He puts you in community with others to do something. I've heard a pastor one time, I think it was T.D. Jakes, was interviewed with Stephen Furtick or something like that. And he was talking about how God has the ability to make a table, a beautiful table. Like, I mean, we have this beautiful table here that we get to sit in and have a conversation. We could have a meal here. We can invite others to be around the table. Yeah. And God, in all of his greatness, by any way he wants, could create the most beautiful, elaborate table. But he doesn't just pop tables out of the sky like, God, I need a table. No, but he made trees that are beautiful. And he gave you a brain and creativity and the ability to create tools, to work together in community, to cut wood and to fashion it and design it and then create a table using the gifts and the things that he's put inside of you. And sometimes we pray, God, I want a table, I want a table, I want a table. And he's like, okay, there's a tree.
Yeah.
Go do it. And so I love this reality that like when we take action on the things that God sees in us, or that we maybe catch a little bit of his vision, even if it's beyond, it is a faith step.
Yeah.
It's a trust in him. And when we trust and we act, sometimes it turns out where we see it all come to pass.
You had your garden bed analogy. Let me double click on that one.
Yeah.
Like you talked about your seeds, right? If the seeds are the words and things that we believe God says, you have a responsibility to do the planting and the weeding.
Yeah.
Right? What are some examples for that for people, like practically, if they want to allow these words to change them to produce something?
Yeah.
What are the weedings and what are the plantings to do?
Yeah, it's great. Like one example that comes to mind right now, because here at the church, we're trying to get people connected in community. Yeah. And a lot of times in the Silicon Valley, people will say like, I feel like I'm isolated. I feel like I'm alone. I'm looking for community. And so I made my way to the church, and you're like, oh, that's great. Hey, we have all of these groups that are here, a bunch of people that are saying, hey, we want community too. And I would love to look through these and see if you find one. And somebody who's going, I want community, really like, yes, this is something I yearn for, but then you're given a list of groups and you don't take the step to sign up for one, or you sign up for one and you don't show up at one.
Yeah.
Like sometimes going, okay, God has put this thing in front of you. Go ahead and go do it. Or, man, I really want to understand more of what Jesus did, what he said. Well, don't just take the Sunday word for it.
Yeah.
Like, open the Bible, begin to read,
Yeah.
ask a lot of questions, because it again goes back to taking action, starting to go, okay, I have this seed, I have this idea, I have this thought. And oftentimes we make God so complicated, but really, like he is a complicated, complex, creature, being, but he is also very simple, very approachable. And so it's just taking those first set of steps to walk towards the thing that we want. And whether it's community or understanding or better relationships, relief in your finances, like there are so many wonderful aspects where we can hear, think, or feel like we want something and then take the actions, whether that's in the community with people at the church, whether it's,
Yeah.
on your own personal study, whether it's, just beginning a conversation with God. Hey, God, I don't know where to go in this area. I might feel like you're asking me to step up in and actually be a part of the mission and to serve here at the local church, or to invite one of my friends at work to join me in this journey of faith exploration that I'm in. And I don't know where to start.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's simply talking and figuring out. And then as you talk and converse, there's a lot of times where you'll get the next step and you then follow it. And it doesn't mean it's not easy. It doesn't mean it's not nerve-wracking. It doesn't mean you don't have anxiety, but
Right.
one step at a time means at least you're making progress. And will you get it wrong? Yeah, of course you're going to get it wrong at times.
Yeah.
But at least you did it. And that's one of the beautiful things about faith, is taking those steps, knowing that even if you get it wrong, he's going to be happy that you tried.
Yeah. It's great. One of the things you said in your message was how God using unassuming people, but unassuming people that trust him to accomplish extraordinary things. And again, right, going back to the coach in the movie, he chose his JV team over the varsity team to represent them in the Olympics because he saw something in them. He chose the unassuming, the underdog, to really do something remarkable. And it's a pattern we see all over Scripture, all over the Bible, right? I mean, Gideon is one example. Probably the most famous underdog story is David and Goliath, right? I think it's throughout. I think most of the prophets were kind of underdogs in the Old Testament. The disciples of Jesus were unassuming people. I was thinking about Mary, who was this humble teenager, was used by God to bring in the Son of God. And then Jesus himself, right? God himself humbling himself to become a human in Nazareth as like a peasant, essentially, to accomplish God's will on earth and to bring redemption for all mankind. What's to be deduced out of God's character in this? Like, what do we learn about who God is? That's what he chooses first. That's like his preference. At least it seems like.
Yeah. I mean, the world that we live in is, I need to prove my dominance. I need to prove my value, my worth. I need to get to the top. I need to be the most influential. I need to be at the top, because if I'm at the top, I can prove that I am worth something. And you see it in politics, you see it in, media influencers, you see it in sports, but there's something so beautiful about using the humble, the unassuming, because if you're at the top, it is expected that, yes, you're the best. Yes, you're going to achieve enlightenment and all the wonderful things because, you're at the top. But when you use those that are at the bottom, the overlooked, the ones that people don't think about, to accomplish things that blow the mind of everybody from the bottom to the top, including the top, it messes with people's mindsets. It shifts us to see, like one of the greatest examples in the sports world, because sports is such a dominant aspect where so many people, have to get to the top. Steph Curry is is probably one of the greatest shooters of all time, if not the greatest shooter of all time. But I think almost every person in the world of basketball would write him off in the beginning of his career.
Yeah.
He's 6'3", maybe, with his fro.
Poor guy.
Like, but like in the basketball world, he's small.
Yeah.
He doesn't have this massively big build. And he's also coming into the league when the three-point shooting aspect of the game is not the dominant force. And he was true to himself, and he was consistent, and he practiced, and he did everything that he could. And he's not the guy that comes out and he's like, look at my greatness. He's always elevating his team. He's passing the ball. He's trying to elevate people around him.
Yeah.
And he's going up against LeBron James in their first finals appearance. Everybody wrote the Warriors off. And what do? They came out and they won. They didn't win just once. They won again and again and again. And the whole time, you have this unassuming guy who, even though he's now a gold medalist, NBA champion, MVP, like all of these, has completely fundamentally changed the way that the game of basketball is played, not only just in the NBA, but in the WNBA, in college now. The three-point shot is very valuable because of him. But everybody would have overlooked him.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same way throughout the Bible. It's the same way in so many areas of our life, but we still fall for the trap. I have to achieve this in order to be great. Whereas some people, like, your job is actually not glorious. Like, stay-at-home moms. Like, oftentimes, their jobs are not glorious and glamorous, but they are doing something that's so beautiful. And not everybody's called to do that. A lot of people feel like, oh no, I work, I go do these different aspects of my career and I still have a family. But some people really feel in their heart of hearts like, this is what I'm supposed to do. My wife being one of them. And she struggles sometimes with like, am I doing enough?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, of course you are. It's not glamorous, and it's often overlooked in our society. We're like, oh, you're not producing income because you're staying home. But you are benefiting the lives of those that God has blessed us with.
Yeah.
And that beautiful reality is God loves the humble, and he opposes the proud. I think that is a beautiful reality of the character of God, and how it also is this upside down kingdom that allows people to see remarkable things by unassuming ways. Because if it was with the 22,000 people that Gideon took instead of 300, it would make sense.
Yeah.
If it was the elite, Germans who, were out there rowing at the age of 3 on the water, being told what to do and knew it, versus these working class junior varsity guys from Washington that come out and beat them all, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And that's why it's profound.
Yeah. That to me was the big learning and reflecting on this in this conversation was how much value God places on humility.
Yeah.
I think far more, and it's become a value now culturally, humility. I don't think, I could be wrong on this, but Jesus did change the landscape of what we value culturally now worldwide, where humility would not necessarily have been seen as a virtue the way it is today.
Yeah.
And I think still now, the way we see God elevating that virtue and that value of humility far beyond, I think, human nature is even understanding or possible belief in it. And that's the thing that strikes to me about this. Like, man, God really deeply values humility. Okay, last question for you. I know that all of you who've worked on your messages, and whenever you're preaching, and I know that's the case for me. I work on a message. I've got my notes that make it live on Sunday. And then there's about 3 pages at the bottom that didn't make it just because you have an allotted schedule and we can't preach for 2 hours. Was there anything specific maybe in your message from what you worked on that you wish you had space to be able to share about?
Yeah. A couple things. So I briefly mention it in there that Gideon tests God twice.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we hear like, oh, they just knew from God and they ran. And of course, they had the full confidence. Gideon, even though he was in God's presence, he heard it from his mouth. He was visited by the angel of the Lord.
Yeah.
Like, I can't comprehend that. I've never seen the angel of the Lord. Like, I would feel like I would have confidence, but Gideon didn't.
Yeah. He's like, but really though?
So, see, he goes, hey, would you humor me?
Yeah.
Could you do this miraculous thing? Like, let me put out this fleece. If the ground is dry but the fleece is wet, I'll know you've called me to this thing. So he goes to bed, God does it. And then the next day he goes, hey, I just want to make sure it wasn't a coincidence,
I should have tried something a little harder.
Yeah.
Damp ground.
This time, would you make the fleece dry but the ground around it damp? And so flips it on God, and God does it, and he shows up and he goes, okay, now I know.
Yes.
Sometimes people are so scared to take steps of faith because they're like, I'm doubting. If I doubt, it's not, if I don't feel good or I don't fully feel like I have it, it must not be God. Well, sometimes doubt is there no matter what.
Yeah.
And you take a step of faith, and you can also say, I don't know if I'm ready for this. And
yeah,
there's a couple moments in the movie where there was some doubt in Joe, the guy who was kind of chronicled through the story. And he even walks away and then realizes it. And so I didn't get a chance to highlight some of that. And then one of the other pieces is in the story of Gideon, although they win the battle, there is some veering off from the commands of God. Gideon doesn't finish super duper well all the way through. And in an underdog story, it's great to hear the chronicling aspect of, woohoo! If I had more time, I would have loved to unpack how after their victory, they lived in the reality of their victory versus fully living in the reality of God's victory, because they put idols in front of them. They treated others that treated them poorly with discontent, and it even murdered additional people. And it wasn't this beautiful, happy-go-lucky underdog story at the very end. The same way that you see people who are professional athletes make it to the chronicle or the pinnacle of their sport end up afterwards not knowing how to live in society because they've only known one thing for so long, and they end up either bankrupt or in broken homes or something happens. And so I would have loved to be able to kind of put the bow on that reality that is not always happy-go-lucky. Sometimes there is suffering. Sometimes, even though we get it right, we will then get it wrong.
Yeah.
And that is part of life. I just only had
that's a whole
20 minutes to be able to actually do the whole thing.
That's a whole other message, honestly.
Yeah.
That'll preach too. Yeah.
Well,
Steven, thanks for teaching. Thanks for sharing your extra thoughts with us on this. I know it's a lot of effort to work on messages, so grateful. I know it was a huge encouragement to our church on Sunday as they heard it. And I just want to make sure you guys know also to continue and joining us throughout this series. There's one more Sunday for our series for At the Movies, as we're going to be unpacking the movie The Upside. So you can catch the services. Again, reminder that we are not on YouTube live online on Sundays. We are on our Church Online platform at Echo.Church, or you can join us at any of our campuses at North San Jose, Sunnyvale, where Steven's at, and our Fremont campus as well. And you can join us there. And make sure, as always, you can like and subscribe. Leave a comment if you have any questions. Our team would love to connect with you there as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time.